Warm greetings. My name is Anil Ganesh and I'm a graduate student at Dalhousie University, supervised by Dr. Rita Arji. I'll be presenting my research titled Smartphone Security and Privacy, a gamified persuasive approach with protection motivation theory. First, we'll be looking at the background, followed by existing interventions for improving awareness about smartphone security. Then, we'll be discussing about our game, followed by the implementation of persuasive principles and level design patterns. Then, we'll discuss about the results of the between subject study, followed by the details of our future work. Research on cybersecurity has been around for a long time, but usable privacy and security came under spotlight when people were being targeted with phishing mails and other cybersecurity scams. Smartphones have evolved rapidly over the past 2 decades. Despite the evolution, security vulnerabilities have been carried forward and even exist today. Up until today, persuasive games to raise user awareness about smartphone security are handful in number, and various researchers have shown that user awareness about smartphone security and privacy is low, and most users do not follow secure smartphone behavior. So, what do we mean by secure smartphone behavior? We refer to the etiquettes that can be followed while using a smartphone to use a smartphone in a safe manner as secure smartphone behavior. For example, installing an antivirus or using a VPN to connect to a public network are some of the secure smartphone behaviors. So, what are smartphone permissions? In order to serve users better, smartphones might need access to sensitive user data like location or sensitive hardware like camera. And in order to access these, applications need users' permission, and these permissions might vary with the type of data needed for the feature. In this example, you can see that the application is requesting access to the device's location to show the user's current location and navigate them to the destination accordingly. Sadly, some unscrupulous practices that still exist. Some of the apps might request unnecessary permissions that might not provide context as to why the permission is required. And the apps might request multiple permissions at once, forcing the user to proceed only after granting those permissions. Due to these unscrupulous practices, users who are unaware about the consequences might allow these permissions and they might be prone to malware. We were able to find only a handful number of interventions, and these interventions do not cover various other smartphone security issues. Our game is inspired by the retro game Super Mario. Recent research has shown that challenging retro games invoke nostalgia and increase the satisfaction of competence among players. In our game, we include a contextual story that involves around Android permissions and other smartphone security issues to make the game more interesting to play. Every game has a story to make it lively, and the narration is what gives the game a meaning and purpose. In our game, the protagonist goes to the forest for a camping trip with his friends, and their trip is ruined by a troll who invades the camp. The troll happens to be angry with them because they were humans who were the inventors of smartphones. At this point, all of them were confused. It turns out that the troll was a new smartphone user and was a victim of data theft. So the troll kidnaps the protagonist's friends and promises to release them when the player helps the troll with its smartphone security problems. This way, I introduce smartphone security in the game while keeping the game narration similar to popular games. The player should also help other jungle creatures with their smartphone security or privacy problems. This way, I introduce other smartphone security issues into the game. We operationalized Android permissions as in game collectibles, similar to coins in Mario, but here the player will be collecting smartphone permissions. So, let's say in a level, the player collects permissions for a specific app. For example, if the app is an online music player, the player has to collect appropriate permissions according to the app features that are mentioned before the start of a level. This is an example of app features of an online music player. And we also explain the players the details of each permission and what type of personal data is linked with each of them. Since the existing games only cover few security issues, I wanted to cover other security and privacy issues. From the literature review, I found 12 security and privacy issues commonly faced by users through a thematic analysis. I included these security and privacy issues in the game in form of trivia questions. So when the player encounters the friendly jungle creature in need of help, they get a scenario for which three options are provided to them, and they need to select the appropriate option. Feedback is provided for both correct and wrong answers. We implemented 14 persuasive principles from the framework for persuasive system design put forth by Oinos Kokonen, and 6 level design patterns as collected by Khalifa and others. So, starting with the persuasive design, here are some examples. So, for example, in this screen, for tunneling, the game has an interesting tutorial that guides the user how to play the game and what are the objectives of the game. For the suggestion principle, when the player picks up a permission or if they answer a quiz, they are provided with an appropriate suggestion. For competition and recognition principle, we had a leaderboard and we awarded badges to the player, which are also shown on the leaderboard. We implemented 6 level design patterns as collated by Khalifa and others. So these patterns make the game more interesting to play. For example, foreshadowing is a design technique where the player is teased with in game objects that cannot be accessed easily, and the functionality might change over time in the game. Here in the image, you can see that the character is standing right above an extra life that cannot be reached directly. Moving forward with safe zone is a level design pattern where the in-game areas where the player is not in danger and can think about their actions, and this is classified as safe zones. In our game, we treat checkpoints as safe zones so that when the player respawns at the checkpoint, they will not be in danger, or in other words, the tension in the game decreases. Moving forward with the study design, we conducted a between subject study and compared our game with a smartphone security document published by NSA. We had a total of 16 participants, out of which 9 of them played the game and 7 of them read the document for a week after answering the pre survey. The participants answered a post survey after a week and were interviewed by the researcher. I leveraged protection motivation theory to measure the user's intention to protect themselves from smartphone security and privacy threats. Protection motivation theory has been around for a long time and was initially introduced to measure people's intention to protect themselves from health related issues. It has often been used in the domain of cybersecurity. Apart from this, I also leveraged the intrinsic motivation inventory to measure the user's overall intrinsic motivation. For analyzing the qualitative data, I used a thematic analysis using the affinity diagram method. Overall, the players enjoyed the game, and the readers found it a bit difficult to understand the document at first. Both the groups were able to reflect about security and privacy in a retrospective manner. From the log analysis, I found that some levels needed some tweaks to improve the game's playability since users kept losing at certain places of the levels. This was also evident from the interview data. As for the game's quiz design pattern, it was evident that most of the players were unaware about app background usage and misuse of location, Wi Fi, or Bluetooth services. From the analysis of survey data, it was evident that the player's intrinsic motivation was better for the game than the document. For the protection motivation theory, the game performed much better than the document as shown in this image. Research has shown that tailoring persuasive games are more effective than the one fit for all approach. As part of our future work, we plan to tailor the game according to users' motivational orientation. The regulatory focus theory states that different people approach their goals in a different manner. For our next study, we plan to increase our sample size and compare the tailored versions of the game with the educational document. These are the references used in the slide. Thank you for your time.